My sister has always had a fragile heart, fragile as shattered glass. She wept for the old hag, despite everything. Maybe because of everything. I remember clutching her tightly as her screams echoed through the night. Both of us cloaked in black soot, her fingers blistered from desperately keeping the oven door sealed. After her sobs subsided, an eerie silence enveloped her. She led me through the cursed house with its decaying walls and frost-covered windows that seemed to watch our every move. I found the tattered clothes we had arrived in, handed her the ragged gown, and she slipped into it without a sound. When we unearthed the hidden stash in the attic, she showed no sign of fear, only gave a ghostly nod when I implored her to help pack the few heavy bags we could barely carry back through the haunted woods. Maybe it would be enough. Enough to shield us from our stepmother's dark whims. I can't go back there. It was the first time she spoke in hours. I froze outside the witch's dilapidated cottage, casting a nervous glance over my shoulder at her. I can't return to them. I exhaled slowly. Neither can I. But where else can we flee? She twisted her fingers nervously beneath her tattered skirt, her eyes vacant and her teeth gnashing her lower lip. After a tense moment, she nodded reluctantly. Fine. You're right. She turned back to the house. Wait. There might still be something in the kitchen. The kitchen? I echoed, dread pooling in my stomach, but she merely nodded. Yes. She didn't think I was watching, but I was. I know which of her dark potions could be useful. If nothing else, we can sell them when we escape. I nodded slowly and followed her back into the cottage, though I hesitated at the ominous archway leading into the kitchen. She moved with unsettling ease through the space, a grim reminder of how long she had been under the witch's malevolent control, while the vile crone tried to fatten me like livestock. She gathered a dozen sinister bottles and vials, carefully hiding them among the remnants of silks and satins we had stolen from the attic before returning to me. Let's leave. Though the trail was obscured this time, she seemed to navigate the twisted trees with an unnatural certainty. I asked her how once, when we paused to wait out the oppressive darkness. But all she replied was that she simply knew now, as if the forest whispered secrets to her that it hadn't before. A shiver of fear crawled up my spine. But I knew she was still terrified herself. I refused to let her see it. I tried to coax her into dreaming about the freedom we might have with the witch's stolen treasures, and managed to elicit a faint, haunted smile from her. But the night was cold and suffocating, and soon we huddled together under a gnarled, ancient tree as we waited for the blackest part of night to pass. When the ghostly dawn light began to seep through the twisted branches, she was the first to rise. She had fallen silent again, responding only with barely audible hums or single, sharp words as we continued our journey. She seemed more determined to lead us now, but something in the rigidity of her shoulders reminded me of something. A shadow I couldn't quite name. Eventually, I succumbed to her silence. When the trees finally parted to reveal the familiar yet unsettling silhouette of our father's home, she froze. Then, without warning, she sprinted forward, and I was barely a step behind her. The door was already creaking open when we reached the porch, and our father greeted us with outstretched arms and tears that seemed to burn with regret. He pulled us close, apologizing endlessly, his voice cracking as he praised the Lord's name. I embraced him, but alongside the relief, a burning anger surged within me. It had started as a flicker, but during our harrowing trek through the haunted woods, it had ignited into an uncontrollable blaze. I locked eyes with my sister over our father's shoulder, and a chill ran through me. If my anger was a raging inferno, then hers was the icy grip of a winter nightmare. Our father explained that our stepmother had fallen gravely ill not long after we vanished. She was confined to her room, trapped in a restless sleep, and had been for days. He didn't believe she would recover, though he had been following the physician's dark orders as best he could. "Perhaps she will awaken to see you," he offered, his voice tinged with hope. When neither of us responded, he sighed deeply and ran a trembling hand through his thick, graying beard. There was more gray now than I remembered. "I know you must be angry with me. With us," he confessed miserably. "That I could lose track of you so easily. It is an unforgivable failing in a father." "Lost?" I flinched at the sharpness in my sister's voice. Our father recoiled as well. She had always had a soft voice to match her tender heart. "We were lost?" she echoed, her gaze piercing into him. Our father stared back, eyes wide with a flicker of fear. "Lost," he finally whispered, his voice barely audible. I averted my eyes, unable to continue facing him. My sister didn't flinch. Suddenly, she rose from our small table. "We'll go see her, then." I blinked, startled by her sudden movement and the steely resolve in her voice, but I followed her into our stepmother's sick room. That blaze of rage flared hotter within me, and I found myself unable to move more than a few steps inside the ominous door. My sister knelt beside the malevolent woman, her hands trembling as she gently smoothed a hand over her fevered brow in a gesture so tender it made me want to lash out. "Here!" She tilted one of the witch's vials to her lips. "This will help." I almost reached out to stop her, but as if sensing my hesitation, she held a steadying hand back toward me. When the vial was empty, she stood and brushed her hands down the front of her skirt. She didn't meet my gaze as she left the room, her presence lingering like a dark shadow. I hesitated a moment longer behind her, staring at the woman who had abandoned us to the cursed woods and the unforgiving wilderness. Already, her breathing seemed unnaturally calm. Anger and fear for my sister clashed within me, twin demons in the depths of my chest. She had always carried such a fragile heart. Our stepmother awakened and seemed lively within a day. Though shocked by our return, she was placated enough by the dark treasures we had stolen that she forced a smile and even shed some fake tears, claiming she was so sorry we had been lost in the woods. My rage seethed hotter, and my sister's demeanor grew colder. "We should celebrate your return," our stepmother declared, a shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders, concealing any remaining signs of her ailment. "What would you like for supper, my darlings?" "Sweetbread." I spun around to glare at my sister, eyes wide and mouth agape. She didn't even glance at me, but I felt her hand clutch mine under the table, her grip icy cold. She forced a smile at our stepmother, and my throat tightened. "But you're still recovering, stepmother." "I feel quite well, all things considered." "I'll make it," she offered gently, her voice devoid of warmth. I could have stopped her then, could have grabbed her hand and dragged us out. We could have taken the dark treasures and fled. It had been foolish of me to think there was nowhere for us to go. We could go anywhere. Seeing our father again, hearing him refuse to acknowledge the horrors they had inflicted, solidified that belief. But my sister glanced at me, just for a fleeting moment, and the chill in her eyes froze me to my seat. She wasn't seeking permission, but I nodded shakily anyway. Our stepmother praised her as a good, kind girl as she moved into the kitchen. Soon enough, the sickly sweet aroma of baking sweetbread filled the air, making me want to retch. My sister served the plates while the bread still steamed ominously, even drizzling the last of our dark honey stores over our parents' portions. "We can always get more at the market now," she said with a hollow, eerie laugh. Our stepmother nodded happily, though our father hesitated a moment before following suit. He watched my sister with a faint weariness as she took her seat beside me. "Come on, then, let's eat." They did. We sat in unnerving silence. It was our stepmother who broke it first. A faint, hacking cough, a sudden furrow in her brow. She looked up with confusion, which swiftly morphed into a horrified realization as she stared at my sister. "You?" Our father choked, blood staining his lips. I looked away, squeezing my sister's hand tightly where she had once more taken it beneath the table. We were desperate," he gasped, reaching for her pleadingly. "I didn't want to. She made me." My sister shook her head slowly. "You let her." He collapsed forward onto the table, his breath a raspy, wheezing rattle that grew fainter with each passing moment. Our stepmother lunged toward us, but her legs gave out, and she sprawled across the floor. A scarlet trail, like cursed blood, oozed from the corner of her mouth. "You?" she gasped again, glaring malevolently up at my sister. "You little witch!" They both began to convulse violently. I buried my face in my sister's shoulder, feeling her stroking my hair, her touch both comforting and terrifying. Even without raising my head, I knew she didn't look away until their last, ragged breaths faded into deathly silence. Then she simply stood, her hand still gripping mine. We were both silent as we gathered our bags, still unpacked by the front door, and stepped out into the chilling evening air. "You're afraid." I swallowed hard. "Why, yes." She smiled at me, squeezed my hand again, and all I felt was an icy void. "You don't need to be. I'll protect you." My sister has always had a fragile heart. Fragile as poisoned glass.